Because of the contraceptive mentality of our culture and the impact of the total acceptance of contraception by the medical community, a discussion on natural family planning can and is very difficult, especially today when less than 25% of Catholics practice the faith. The traditional ways of presenting NFP as a holy way of spacing births will not suffice. However, what will catch the attention of today's couples is NFP's benefits of preventative health care for women. The Catholic Church promotes natural family planning. The USCCB states, "Natural family planning is the general title for the scientific, natural, and moral methods of family planning that can help married couples either achieve or postpone pregnancy. Since the methods of NFP respect the love-giving, unitive, and life-giving, procreative nature of the conjugal act, they support God's design for married love." Natural family planning methods provide a unique option for married couples. These are some of the advantages. Lack of medical adverse effects. Couples learn a lot about reproduction. Families can be planned within the scope of the Church's view. Also, when used properly, NFP has a 95% effective rate. There are several methods of NFP, each one different from the other, and couples can choose whichever method they prefer. As you could see, there are a number of natural family planning methods available to meet the needs of couples in terms of physical and medical issues, as well as cultural sensitivities. That is why this week I interviewed a trained practitioner that works with Hispanic couples in the Diocese of Fort Worth. His name is Jean-Pierre Cortez. Is a fertility care practitioner based in McKinney, Texas. He offers his services to couples seeking to get married through the Diocese of Dallas and the Diocese of Fort Worth. As a practitioner, JP received extensive education and practical experience under supervision of a certified educator. In addition, JP holds a bachelor's degree in science, mechanical engineering, and he works in the semiconductor field. JP is a graduate of the Pope Paul VI Institute through the Creighton University School of Medicine in Omaha, Nebraska. He also experienced with his wife all the struggles that go with endometriosis, and through the Creighton model and NAPR technology found healing and restoration. JP has appeared in many TV programs in Spanish television talking about natural family planning.
So that's correct. I am a fertility care practitioner. I teach the Creighton model system, which is a standardized method that helps couples or single women to identify when they're fertile and when they're not, in the sense of understanding the different biological markers that the woman has. Well, so NFP, which stands for Natural Family Planning, in the context of the Creighton model system of what I teach, we teach that the couples have the power to know when they're fertile and when they're not, so they can decide when to conceive and when to postpone pregnancy. And this is the key, because I really think when John Paul II said that our faith is very linked to reasoning, to science, he was absolutely correct, especially in this field of knowing when you're fertile and when you're not, because the woman will be able to translate what her body tells her, and then in conjunction with her spouse, will be able to have this, I call it power, to know when to achieve pregnancy and when to postpone it. Unfortunately, many couples, especially within our church, do not know that they can understand what their body is, how the fertility works, etc., etc. And they are caught in this plague of contracepting with artificial hormones, or in this case, what you mentioned, the sterilization, which is none other than cutting their fertility empowerment that these couples have. Right. So with the Creighton model system, it is based on a very important biological marker, which is the cervical mucus. So the cervical mucus is produced in the cervical crypts, which they are stimulated by estrogen during this ovulation cycle that the woman has, and the woman will be able to identify in a standardized language. And what I mean about that is it will give a score of how is the cervical mucus. And also by knowing the different characteristics of this cervical mucus, the woman, the couple, will be able to understand when she's going to ovulate. And no, and one of the beauties, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but one of the beauties that it really made me go out of my comfort zone, because I'm an engineer myself, so I went to study to become a fertility care practitioner to the what is now St. Pope Paul VI Institute, is that besides knowing precisely when the couple is fertile or infertile, the couple will be able to understand how is the entire menstrual cycle, starting with the menses, how long is the pre-ovulatory phase, how long is the post-ovulatory phase of the cycle, how is the cervical mucus, is it good, is it bad, and the entirety menstrual cycle, the translation of the entirety of this menstrual cycle will empower the woman to understand how is her health. And if there is any issue, this woman can go to the science, to the medical side of the Creighton model fertility care system, which is NAPRO technology. Yeah. So I honestly think, and I'm gonna answer the second question first. I honestly think that ignorance and the non-well spread of the different methods to understand the couple's fertility are the main reasons. And also, we live in a world that unfortunately we don't put God first, and we don't ask Him what we want to do, especially the couples. And even when they're preparing for marriage, I'm so sad that when couples are getting married through the church and they don't get any instruction or any knowledge about this, and I think that's the main ignorance, the non-well spread, especially through the church. Unfortunately, even in the pulpit or even in different type of ministries that every parish has, I don't see this. So couples get caught on this death culture that it's everywhere, especially when these couples go for any medical reasons. Now they go to the doctor, the mainstream gynecologist, and these guys only give them birth control pills or any artificial hormones. So these couples say, "Oh well, my doctor is telling me that I have to take this birth control pill because hormonal issues." So they cross their arms and they say, "Yep, that's fine." So everything is fine. Oh, and by the way, this doctor is pro-life as well, and he's giving me birth control pills. But anyway, that's another story. But I think is that again, ignorance, not the non-well spread message through the church, and couples getting caught in the culture of death, especially when there is quote unquote medical side issues, and they go and they receive all these plague of artificial hormones. Now, what is in reality is, I really think it's letting God working in our marriage. Because if we know who we are, if we understand who we are as human beings, how our body works, how our body tells us when we're fertile and we're not, I think we're achieving what the theology of the body talks about, that we are made in likeness and images of God. So we will translate the love that we have, especially as men, to our spouse, because it's easy when you talk to a woman, and they talk about NFP, but when guys like us talk about NFP, that's amazing because we now bring all our desire of having intimacy per se, because that's our first necessity as men biologically is is sex. But when we bring that into the context of knowing how our spouse is fertile or infertile and how they can talk, I always joke, we say when they can talk about when they're fertile and when they're infertile, they can even talk about football between them. Even if the TV is off, they can even talk, because that intimacy, which is not just the genital intimacy, but it's just the entirety of the human body, body and a soul, talking about whether they're fertile or infertile, and they can decide whether to have intimacy or not. It's amazing. And I've been doing this since 2016 with the Diocese of Fort Worth, although I've been a practitioner since 2014. And in my personal experience, since I am a man and I can talk to the other men more freely, more openly, it's been very rewarding, because I have talked to couples that have these sterilizations that you mentioned. And I always tell them, for instance, to this part of the couples that are out there, I tell them, if you guys know when you're fertile and when you're not fertile, you guys should and must have intimacy when you're not fertile. Because if you're having intimacy when you're fertile and you have this sterilization, you're giving the back to God. You're telling God, I don't want you in my intimacy. I don't want you in my bed. And God wants us completely, entirely. The only thing that I have seen is the sharing of these charting, and maybe I'm getting more into the detail of what the Creighton model system works, but we have a chart where the couples will understand when they're fertile and when they're not, and the different biological markers, blah blah blah. So they put all these stamps and descriptions. So I have seen a couple of these couples that did not want to share that with me for corrections or adjustments of how they were charting. But other than that, I honestly think that what the Diocese of Fort Worth is doing, for instance, is an example, because even though they don't do the entirety of the teaching of this Creighton model system, at least they get an introductory session or a follow-up session where they will open their minds and will understand. Like I have seen couples that were with the birth control pills, and I told them, I said, look, this is hurting your marriage because your husband is using you, and also you're opposing to what God wanted. And I always joke and say, God is not a fool. He knows who we are. And if you guys are going to get married by the church, which is awesome, and I always praise them, I said, look, you need to give God everything. Okay. And when they understand with faith why we oppose, and with reason why these artificial hormones are completely bad for their body, for their health, they can die, they really realize and say, you know what, I'm going to talk to my husband, I'm going to talk to my wife, and we're going to stop this because it's really hurting us. So I really think it's a good way of introducing to natural family planning through this marriage preparation. I encourage every diocese to do it, to be every parish to do it, to be honest.
As stated before, the Catholic Church approves and promotes natural family planning. Any couples looking to get married should learn more about the methods and the effectiveness so they can plan their families accordingly. For more information, please contact the Life Ministry offices in your local diocese.